Good morning, grasshoppers, or good afternoon anyway. Let's see, the music needs to be just a little bit adjusted here. I'll just make sure I fix that if I can. One moment, I apologize. Actually, it looks pretty good now, but I think it just needs to be adjusted ever so slightly. There we go. Pardon my OCD. Just in case you can't read it. Ah! Interestingly enough, I think that'll have to do for now. I also have a review of Chess Informant 153, a further review of Chess Informant 153 coming up. The current review is for Petrosian Year by Year Volume 1. And Petrosian's games have always been near and dear to my heart, as they have, for the most part, established for me over the years the rules for about which you must abide in order to become a good player. You can't break the rules of the position. And those that try to break the rules, that you know many of them, they try to force themselves on the position, they try to force the attacks, they try to sacrifice without reason, they try crazy pawn breakthroughs without completing their development, perhaps, or they just don't obey many of the principles of attack and defense at the right times. And I remember going through Vasilyev's Life and Games of Tigran Petrosian, cover to cover. And then everything became clear to me on what I must do. It's still a little evident that I'm losing my voice, or that my voice is still recovering. So this is going to be a very short, less than perhaps a half an hour stream, or about a half an hour stream to start off this series. Basically recovering part 1 here, and in a further part, we're going to do part 1. And then we're going to continue with volume 2. Now, volume 1, the introduction by Tibor Karolyi, talks about all of the previous volumes that have come before this one, and in what manner they were respected and whatnot. Perhaps Edward Sheckman's posthumously published Python Strategy was written by Tigran Petrosian and published after his death. Edward Sheckman had to re-edit it, and they published it originally in Russian under the name Reliability Strategy. And then they published it in by Russia Chess House in 2015 as My Best Games by Oleg Stetsko. And there was another book, interestingly enough, that I found, and I don't necessarily know how similar this one is to the last, Petrosian's Legacy by Tigran Petrosian. And looking upon this book, Rely but Verify and stuff like that is all in here. Many of his favorite phrases and his concerns about certain positions. This book also assisted me amazingly. I'm noticing that I'm missing Vasilyev's hardcover copy of Petrosian's game, so I'm going to have to re-add that one somehow to my library. In any event, I think that I was going to put on the timer for a couple of questions as well in this study. Just make sure of where that might be located before I forget. Where are you, timer? There we go. And we need to put it in a place where we'll always be able to get to it. And we'll enable it to be seen. Where are you, timer? Oh, there you are. Just above the chat box, for the most part. I don't expect too much chat in this particular one, as I often go with subscribers-only chat for these particular discussions. So let me just first make sure that's enabled. During the studies, subscribers-only chat is enabled because this is content that is mainly for those who really support the channel. Good morning, Nico. I hope Nico's okay. Is he frowning because of the... I'm going to gift this one in advance. One second here. Just to make sure. He tried to renew his subscription this morning. I don't know that it didn't have anything to do with his unfortunate nationality, even though he's located in Hungary. I know when I was in... No worries, Nico. Needless to say, I appreciate you being here. Yeah, this is going to be a short stream for the most part, but I want you present for all of the subs-only things. Now, in one of his earliest games, Tigran Petrosian faced off with the master Petrosian-Flohr in a simultaneous. And I have to say, simuls have somewhat played a very big role in my life as well. When I was younger, I played a number of players as black and as white. Most of the time, the simul taker takes the white pieces. In this particular example, however, Petrosian-Flohr was a very... what's the right word? a very pro-Russian grandmaster. He was quite happy to support the Russian idealistic standing and holding of chess as part of the culture until he actually moved to Russia. Then he found out what meager circumstances the average player. They took him out of his luxurious hotel room and put him in a very small flat. And he looked around and he said, "What's this?" And he goes, "Well, before you were a guest and you were treated as a guest. Now that you're a resident, since you have emigrated to the country, we're going to treat you as a resident." And under the old Soviet routine, let's just say that you didn't always get such a fair shake. I don't know how old Nico Demonius is, but he has conveyed and relayed some of his most recent experiences with it as the current administrator of Russia is trying to bring back some of those days. Needless to say, chess players were treated with the opportunity to keep their career. One thing about Petrosian that ensured his draws, by the way, and his drawing nature, was that in order to keep his status as a professionally paid grandmaster, that to which Petrosian-Flohr also aspired when he emigrated to Moscow / the former Soviet Union in the 1930s or 40s, is that Petrosian had to finish in the top X. Definitely the top 3 to 5 places, depending on the size of the tournament. So he did everything in his power, Petrosian, to make sure that he finished and secured his spot. Even when I play poker and I know that the last 9 places in a tournament, the final table perhaps, are the only ones who are going to get paid, I do everything in my power to make sure I get to that final table, to make sure I get paid. And then from there, I might work upon winning the tournament. But I'm not going to try to risk everything to get first place when right? For the most part. So for the most part, in this particular game, Petrosian-Flohr does not treat the young Tigran Petrosian. The year is 1942. And he was born in 1929, so he was roughly about 13 years old, give or take. In fact, he might have been exactly 13 years old, as this was June of... Flohr is actually black. Yes, good correction on the spelling. Flohr is actually black. And so it's possible that the date of this game is June 1942. Petrosian was born just past the middle of June, on June 17th. So therefore, Flohr treats him as a young player. Now, I've also adopted this strategy, and I've had many young players not take the pawn on e5, or they take the pawn on e5 and feel very uncomfortable. So this is actually a very good opening to play as black against less experienced players, or those players that might be intimidated to play you, because you're playing a lesser-known variation which has a certain amount of credibility and reliability. The most recent claim to fame is Nigel Short's victory using it in the 1992 candidates semifinal to challenge Garry Kasparov in 1993. And Karpov was more or less upset, literally, with his opponent's opening repertoire and Nigel Short's playing style. So here we are. It's pretty obvious that we are going to take this pawn and choose the most reliable move. Now, in this particular position, there are 1, 2, 3 possible continuations in this position that you may or may not choose to play. I'll give you 45 seconds or so to consider these possibilities, and obviously you have to have a strategy or a plan of attack. I have played Petrosian's plan most recently after having studied this game. And I've also played the slightly less aggressive lines, as well as the main line, which I play most often. So 3 moves in this particular position for white. I know it's a little late, but I did not have it queued up for the most part. Now, as it turns out, yeah, e3 is a little too passive. The main line is bishop to f4, hanging onto the pawn, and that line usually runs along these lines with bishop to b4 check. And although I grew up with knight c3, queen e7, queen d5, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and black playing f6, this is the main line, and it is very comfortable for white for a variety of reasons, because we're up a pawn, we have the 2 bishops, and we have a bit of space, and black's d7 pawn can only move as far as the d6 square. So honestly, after the move d6, you might find Iranian defeating Ivanchuk in this particular position. You might also find that most modern players today, after this check, play the move knight on b to d2, as was used by Karpov against Nigel Short in 1992. Petrosian, on the other hand, chooses a different strategy. Knight f3, which was Nico's best suggestion, his first suggestion, runs into several tricks here. Basically, with the move bishop c5, it kind of forces knight c3, and white does have to watch out for a number of tactical tricks involving knight takes f2, and perhaps even pressure on this particular pawn and a number of other lines. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, Petrosian chooses one of Alekhine's favorite continuations. Oh, let me just check the music volume level. I apologize. I know it's loud for me. I don't necessarily know how loud it is for you. So therefore, the music isn't necessarily the key feature here. So the tricky part is that Petrosian-Flohr chooses yet another lesser-known continuation with the move h5, instead of playing knight takes e5, which is more commonly seen today. Knight takes e5, and after f4, black has to find the rather interesting move knight on b to c6, which is the move approved by theory. Knight to g6 runs into further problems as the pawns may rush forward, and of course white is going to reach into the center with knight f3, and it looks very good having that space advantage for white. But the target of the knight on g6, although it may serve black well in practice among Budapest players, since Nico's in Budapest/Hungary now, I find it very amusing. Nico should actually look up Conte de Luna. I believe Conte de Luna is around there as well. In Hungary at some, but he may be traveling for an operatic event. Therefore, e4, h5, h3. Personally, I prefer the move bishop e2, but h3 is one of the main lines, and it forces the matter as far as these things go. Petrosian insists upon limiting black's bishop's placement, and even walks into this. I also prefer either queen to c2 or queen to b3 in this particular position to the move queen to d2. d6, f4, and now knight to g6 is a little bit dubious on black's part. Interestingly enough, the move that was suggested was the very Sveshnikovian-esque knight to d7, knight to c5 to put more pressure on the e4 pawn. The Sicilian-esque, I should say, not necessarily Sveshnikovian-esque. So needless to say, let's continue our development. Black puts some pressure on the e4 pawn, which is actually being attacked. And just recently I had to suck this one up. Yeah, right? I certainly have gone through all of the city names for that exact reason whenever something came up. Nico. Hence, Scottish versus Scotch opening and Scotch Gambit and stuff like that. So here we are. Now, right at this moment, one really has to consider what is black's best option here to prevent white from cementing yet a further advantage. And I think the Grandmaster Petrosian-Flohr relied a little bit too much on a tactical opportunity here. So let me flip this board for just a moment to show Petrosian-Flohr's side of the board, and we will... Good morning, Rubino. Our VIP, our legend of the stream. We are looking for candidates for black in this particular position. We're rushing it a little bit. If anyone needs more time, of course, reviewing the video on demand, they will be able to. And of course, if you rewatch this particularly short video on demand, you'll be able to. Rubino 17. I believe you are friends with someone that I knew. I'm drawing a blank right now. But let's concentrate on this at hand. There are three moves, of course, that are better, and one of them I know would be played by Magnus Carlsen. We are blasting our way through it, right? I'll give everybody a few extra seconds to hit that send button. The move that was played by Petrosian-Flohr is crazy. It is bishop, I'm sorry, not bishop to d7. Bishop d7 would be more sane. But f5 is the move that Petrosian-Flohr chooses to try to take advantage of his opponent's king being in the center. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with castles either, to a certain extent, but white does have a very clear and present dangerous advantage. Knight to h4 is perhaps, I could see Magnus Carlsen playing this as I've seen him play it before, if I recall the game. But I've seen him play this type of concept before to get a hold of those weak dark squares and to try to, you know, dodge on in there, or at least to simplify off. Black's position is cramped and exchanges suit him. So flipping the board right now and putting down the move, I'm going to scroll this up so I can put a little bit of a question mark on that particular move. f5, of course, is met by knight takes f4. And white just castles, interestingly enough, which is very, very cool. It is very, very cool. Bishop takes c3 as the queen is tied down. Like, you can see Petrosian-Flohr's machinations working here, because if queen takes c3, the bishop on e3 hangs, so we're ruining the pawn structure. And only now do we save the knight from a torturous fate. And once again, we have candidate moves for black. Candidate moves for black. I will flip the board one more time just to make sure that everybody knows that we're looking on this. Here's another moment where Petrosian-Flohr misses the chance for absolute equality and plays a lesser move. As it turns out. This type of move absolutely immediately occurs to me whenever I am playing. Yeah, Nico nails it. Nico nails it on the first try. Bishop takes f5. Because the queen is overworked. We already mentioned that Petrosian-Flohr had played a tactic earlier because of the queen's overworkedness on the bishop on f5. So had he played this move, queen takes e3, king takes b2, although it does look like a difficult position for black, it is quite equal, according to our esteemed silicone friend. Instead, however, let's go back to white. I apologize for the flipping of the board. Rook to c1, I know, tour c1. Sound like you're European. Rook to f8, that is, yeah. No, I understand the cousins. f8 and c1 are cousins. So black misses his opportunity and plays the move bishop to d7, and then even further in this position fails to escape a very serious tactic on white's part. This is again where Nico's suggestion previously comes in. He should have castled. Now granted, white still has a slight advantage here. He actually plays the move castling queenside. Now this is a typical simul error. Speaking from experience, this is a very typical simul error. As you are playing many boards at the same time, it is early in the game, I'm certain it's move number 16, and he runs into an immediate loss of material. Irina-chan, good morning, how are you? Great to see you. Now, interestingly enough, hold on here, I just need to check something. Yeah, just checking on one more layout problem. So black actually plays the move queen to f7, bishop takes d8, rook takes d8, and immediately white seizes upon mobilizing his pawn majority on the queen side. Black now, once again, has an opportunity to at least try to create some counterplay by activating his rook to f8, or by first exchanging on g4, and then trying to break down the pawn structure with g6 or queen to f6. But instead, Petrosian-Flohr makes a relatively serious blunder. I've not yet put a question mark on this, but now everything, good evening, yeah, it is evening there. I'm sure it's lovely. So here we go. Candidate moves for white. Now the idea here is that you want to not look for the best move, but look for all of the good moves in the position. Yeah, I'm squeezing one in before I have to give my second lesson of the day, Quadraspassky. Ideally. But remember, you get 3 darts, based on the knight being unprotected on a5. Doubling rooks is absolutely possible. Irina has noted that the weakness on c4 is prominent and real. I love how Nico takes his time into the last possible minute, because that's exactly what you should do. And then he attempts to. Interestingly enough, we have a material advantage, everyone. So if we have a chance for another tactic, you saw the tactic of removing the defender of the bishop on e3, but this simplifying tactic is absolutely devastating. The unprotected queen and the unprotected knight on a5 forced not only the exchange of queens, but the correcting of the pawn structure. So it's a little late for black to try to get his pieces active. White now has quite a number of choices in this position. The move that he plays is not... Yeah, exactly. No, Tigran Petrosian was a very tactical player. Here we go. Once again, we are going to give some candidate moves for white. And I am expressing this. Normally I give about 90 seconds, Irina. But this is geared a little bit more for YouTube. We are simulcasting to YouTube. Candidate moves for white. Whatever the timer is going on the stream, that means that we are looking for candidate moves for white. If you are watching and have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, this is your chance. This is absolutely your chance to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Interesting. When I had shown this game previously in a lesson some time ago, I already know from the notes based on the game that my preferred move was to limit the movements of the knight with rook to d4 as at least that square was pointed out as a good outpost square for the knight to reach e6. However, the best move in the position when we first started looking at it was knight to g5 and knight to e6. The difference between these two moves is curious for me. I don't necessarily know that there's that great of a difference, but I think that if anything should bother this rook, they want the opportunity to place the rook on that square later. Why g5 over d4? Exactly, I don't know. But now, ironically, Stockfish has changed its mind and it prefers d4 over g5. Like I said, when I used this game for a lesson some time ago, I have been using MD Knight's books. By the way, these were sent to me on my Amazon wish list by MD Knight Zero. I have to really be thankful. I remember the day he asked me, do you still have that Amazon wish list? And he was in exceptionally good mood that day, I know, because days later I couldn't figure out what he might have sent me, but then these arrived one day after the other, parts 1 and part 2. So here we are. And we both have Amazon Prime, more than likely. However, while I prefer knight to d4, Irina's first suggestion was the move played in the game, a rook on the 7th. So she matched wits. Yeah, that was it. The link was just above Quadrispasky. I don't push it on anyone, and I haven't been able to enable it in my Twitch about page down below, unfortunately. So, needless to say, rook to e7, Irina nailed it on her first try. I also like to run a game called Miniature Golf, where you get up to 5 tries, not unlike a miniature golf scoring sheet. And you write down your moves in order of preferences or as your instinct points them out. So if it's your first move, of course, you want to get the lowest score possible, you get a 1 stroke. And if it's your fifth move, of course, you get 5 strokes, like the Roman numeral scoring system. And unfortunately, if you are, as you compete against yourself, as you study a game, going over a game, never to get a stroke, indeed. Speaking from the medical establishment, thank you, Irina. It's best never to get a stroke. Not even 1. Or the fewer strokes, the absolute better. Needless to say, rook to e7, and black, of course, begins immediately by trying to take advantage of the unprotected knight on f3. And we go straight into this endgame, as I went to quiz on this particular one. But material, this is going to be a recurring theme here. Material, with the idea of this pawn moving forward 2 squares, is relatively serious. As black throws in h takes g4. Where's our music? There we go. Oh no, let me not get rid of the music. So, yeah, pawn to g7, absolutely. Just keep hitting him. Just keep hitting him. And now the moment of truth. We have a further improvement on Petrosian in this particular position as we look for candidate moves for white. Click on D to E1. RDE1 is how we would write that. That's where we're going to get Irina into tournament play soon enough. And of course HG4. And Nico actually finds Petrosian's move as he matches wits with Petrosian fairly well. Petrosian actually didn't play the best move, both knight to g5 and knight to d4 with the further intention of invading. And this rook then can go to f1 and hit f8. That's the ideal. However, Petrosian, of course, does not move his knight or play h takes g4. H takes g4 was Arena's best move suggested. And actually, I use my whiteboard that is behind me usually for this particular game. I have to shift out the shelves behind me, which are on casters, and I usually switch those around so that I can keep track. If we have a larger group, then it makes it very easy to keep score and have you compete with each other for the first scores. I get to write down your names and all of that, and then we figure out some form of reward. However, for this short YouTube video, we're basically just looking at Petrosian's ability to try to limit the damage and remain an exchange down with an outside passed pawn. Petrosian-Flohr's ability to limit the damage that Petrosian is inflicting on him. Well, actually, I think that in that position, Irina, I'm not entirely sure what you were going to be doing about the pawn taking the knight. I agree that it's probably still an advantage, but this may or may not be unnecessary counterplay. It still allows rook f7, obviously. Rook f7, even here, getting behind the pawn is... I didn't mean to say it wasn't so proper, but in the mind's eye that I looked at it briefly, I realized that moving the knight and playing rook to f1 is a far safer course. And that's the only reason why rook to e1 was not in the top 5 moves for the most part in this position. Even knight to h4 with the idea... Even knight to h4 with the idea of rook to f1 is considered a little bit better than giving up the material unnecessarily. So as it turns out, Petrosian-Flohr has limited the damage to the best he can. If anybody saw Magnus Carlsen's Armageddon game today, I'm sorry, not Magnus Carlsen's, Hikaru Nakamura's Armageddon game today with Nepomniachtchi, Nepomniachtchi did not even have a single pawn for his being down the exchange, and he flailed about and tried to create counterplay to the new world championship, the new world 960 champion, Hikaru Nakamura. Cheers to him. He played really, really well. The only reason why this stream was delayed is that I ended up having to watch an Armageddon game. And I do not watch a lot of sports. I wait until the championship season. For example, I like tuning in to the World Series of Baseball. The Phillies had an amazing victory in Game 1 over the Houston Astros. And I believe Game 2 was last night. I'm not sure what the score is right at the moment because I was doing some family stuff. But needless to say, one thing that I know for certain is that if you are going to watch sports, the championship season and the championship games are when the players cannot hold anything back. The same thing happens when we study world champions games. The world champions as a whole, as players, are the best ones to study. It is. It's not even a sport if you consider that half of the game you're sitting around. Half of the game, even the starting players, are sitting around. Now, it's true that the football players will rotate in and out, but the action is much faster and more furious. But in soccer, nobody rests. Nobody rests for the whole game. Now, that's a real sport. Rugby is the same way to a great extent. So here we are. Black's knight finally arrives on the scene, which is why I would have loved to have my rook on d4 to prevent such an occurrence. And in this particular position, we're going to do some candidate moves for white. And try to give everybody as much participation as I can. Needless to say, rook on d to f1 absolutely is perfectly acceptable. Rook to d4, tagging the knight, absolutely. No one suggested rook to h1, but Irina did get in the best move in the position, which is just to get that pawn moving. The best move in the position is obviously the move h4. Because if anything, we have to be purposeful. I'm going to scroll this up and give that the exclam that it deserves. And I have to say, it is quite lovely to see this move on the board. Petrosian, though, good news for you, Irina, played all of your favorite moves because all of you chose rook on d to f1. And I'm happy that everybody corrected their notation because I do judge students based on their notation. And they get half off if they have a ambiguous scorekeeping. Absolutely. So for the most part, matching wits with the world champion is the ideal. The unfortunate part about this is that black does get a little bit of counterplay against exactly what we were worried about. Had we played the move h4, should the knight go to e5 in this particular position, then we have the additional choice of putting our rook behind the passed pawn, as well as just diving straight forward because there's no way black can get behind the passed pawn as the other rook can still reach here. Are those dark enough? They look pretty good on that screen. My screen is a little bit different. The highest resolution, which is what Twitch is giving. So rook on d to f1, knight to e5. And now Petrosian again doesn't necessarily choose to penetrate, to get in to the other side of the board, to cause some problems, and chooses a little bit more of a passive move. Remember, Petrosian is only 13 years old at this moment. It is one of his earliest known tournament games. When we return, we're gonna skip to 1944, and I'm hoping to do that after my next lesson because I'm so enthused and I want to keep this layout tentatively. This is the Licha study layout that I set aside specifically for this. I hope everyone appreciates it. Yeah, you have Twitch with the future world champion. Hey, I've lost to enough kids to know that they are no slouches. So there it is, on average. Let me just check the music again. 1 second here. Try to get rid of that red line. There we go. So, rook to h7, and now we might be stifled a little bit. We're stifled just a little bit, and it is now time, of course, for us to decide how we are going to get this pawn moving. And at long last, the rook arrives on f4 in order to start stair-stepping this pawn up the board. Black does choose to strike back in the center, as he does need to get some things done. White reinforces the center and keeps black's king limited. This is something you want to do when your opponent's position is cramped, and you don't necessarily want to seek exchanges to help them out. King to b2, Petrosian sees the need and mimics his opponent's activation of his king to not lose any time on that particular square, to be able to reach here first. Now, at long last, it is time for the move that we all wanted. h4. So black seeks some counterplay on the other side of the board. h5 would have been the best move. I'm not entirely sure what he hoped to prove with rook to g3. But at the same time, maybe he's planning on the same stair-stepping maneuver, it looks like. So after h5, he can actually play rook to g5 to keep supporting it, and he's going to keep stair-stepping his way up. This is actually a common endgame technique when you have a rook and two passed pawns versus a king. Exactly. Likely by pinning the knight. Exactly. So, of course, we see the stair-stepping maneuver as we push forward. Black once again desperate to see some counterplay. And there is nothing, unfortunately, to be done about this particular maneuver. I will give us one last shot at candidate moves for white. Since we're expediting and expressing through these. All right. Rook h5. Yeah, thank you, MD Knight Zero. I was waiting for you, sir. MD is in the house. Don't worry, this is only part one of several. I'm hoping to finish it up because I have a lesson in that Armageddon game. Took it out of me. No, we have to get our rook behind the passed pawn now or never, and it might be a little bit too late. And after king to d2, rook to a1, Petrosian actually ended the game with h5. h7, unfortunately. MD Knight, beast mode. In your absence, I had gifted Nico. We have subs-only chat enabled. I have to remember to take it off, as I have a lesson just now at 6:30. I told them I needed an extra 5 minutes. And yes, this is also being aired to YouTube for those of you. And I put MD Knight, I'm giving him credit in the, and he was taking advantage of the Amazon wish list, which I'm very thankful for. But I think it's going to take 2 or 3 parts to do justice to this book. We talked about his early years. This is a game that took place in 1942. And Cyrena Chan, indeed. And the two of them were lighting up our Discord earlier. You may follow me on all of my social media and join the Discord with the socials linked there. Chessable, Discord, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, please subscribe to YouTube. We are going to go to Reykjavik from here, by the way, everybody. We're headed to Reykjavik. I'm sending you off to Reykjavik right now in a very casual atmosphere with a young lady that I met in 2016 when we had some late night eats during the Magnus Carlsen. She came to New York City, and she is a relative sweetheart, very professional, Maria Lovalova. And Maria does have a stream where she shows off her photos. And photo chess. She is actually sharing, I believe, her photos from Reykjavik at the Fisher Random Playing Hall, streaming in 960. She may have gone to eat dinner because they have a very limited window for food and such like that. But needless to say, let me roll the ending credits for all of you who are here, especially MD Knight Zero. MD Knight, I'm going to give him another shout out for him being such an amazing supporter of the stream. Thank you all for being here. We will continue this with part 2 of part 1, and we'll jump to 1944 to the earliest recorded games of Tigran Petrosian year by year. Thank you so much for being here. Cheers and ciao, everyone. Please hang tight as Maria is about to come